This
Master Research
conference will
Consultant.
now be recorded.
Oh, there goes a conference recording session. But we're here to, as Jen and Jeremy touched on, to go over the findings from the housing study update that dates back to 2013. So, um, quick recap here. We kicked things off back in early part of the year. So pre-COVID, so we had our kickoff meeting back in February, which is a completely different world than we are in today. And the data we collected for the study was, first and second quarter of the year. So really between, March, April, May into June, and then we issued our draft report in July. So a lot of data we did collect was during, the COVID times, shutdown times, and whatnot. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of the findings going forward. Then after we issued a draft report back in July, we had a review and comment period with the cities and the county and other stakeholders. And then earlier this month, back in November, we issued the final report. So it is out there now to be read. It's a book. I'm going to warn you. It's about 375 pages. So a lot of data, a lot to digest, a lot of moving pieces, so to speak, going on with the housing study. A quick recap here of where we're at today versus where things kicked off back in 2013. So we did a lot of the work for the previous study back in 2013. The report was issued in 2014. As a result of that study, there was a county-led HRA levy that went forward in 2016. And then the Coalition for Rochester Housing has initiated a number of projects over the past, 3-4 years plus, and has assisted on a number of new rental developments and whatnot. But since that 2013 report, 2014 report has been issued, there's been a pretty robust housing market, whether you look at the for sale side or the rental side. There's been a lot of development, especially in the apartment sector, and we'll spend a lot of time on that today. But we calculate there's been, roughly 5,000 plus units, give or take, built in Rochester, this decade, and really since that 2013 study. So a lot of development. And we have some slides that kind of show today versus 2013, how that demand shook out, what was delivered, what was met, what were the gaps, what were the gaps that we projected back in 2013, 2014, what wasn't delivered, and we'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll spend some time today on COVID-19, how it's affecting the real estate market, housing industry, and I'll touch on some of the outlook for 2021 and where we go from here during this pandemic, and how it's going to affect the real estate industry and the overall economy. So what I'd like to do is we have about an hour presentation here, and then at that time we'll open it up for Q&A, chat box, or whatnot, and try to field all your questions. But I'd like to get through the presentation and save the questions for the back end of it. We've dedicated about an hour and a half for Q&A, so everyone should have more than enough time to get all the questions in, and we'll field everything we can. So the plan is here to go give about an hour here on the background, and then just dive into some Q&A. So we'll kick things off here with demographics. So demographics, again, key driver for future growth trends, what's going to happen with future housing industry trends is going to be led by demographics. So in keeping with our previous study back in 2013, 2014, we maintained the same submarkets that we did 7 years ago. So we have 6 key submarkets, and I'll stress again that we went outside the county borders for these submarkets. As we go to the north, we have Pine Island straddles 2 counties. as well as got Chatfield straddling 2 counties, and we also went out to the east to St. Charles in Winona County, and we included data
I'm good.
from St. Charles. So what happens throughout the report
Oh,
is
it's okay.
we present the data both at the sub-market level
Yeah.
and the Olmsted County level. So you see it
Um.
presented both
Well,
ways.
if you're
This past decade. If we look back to our projections back in 2013, they were pretty much right on. They were only off by a couple hundred people for our 2020 projections for the county. So we had some pretty robust growth uh, this past decade, 60% growth rate, and that's been historical norm. You see, as you look at that chart, you'll see historically Olmsted County has just had substantial growth rates, the past 50 years plus, and each year it keeps ramping up. But the projections were right on par for 2020, and we continue to see things ramping up, over this decade into 2030. But as we look at where we are today, so now this next slide is going to show you where we're at today. So we've kind of broken down each of these submarkets into the demographic cohorts we have in the marketplace today. So, it's sorted out by generation. So quick background, silent generation would be, born prior to 1945. Baby boomers, 1964 to 46 to 64. Generation X would be 1965 to 1979. Millennials, 1980s and 90s. And the latest would be Generation Z, which would be the 2000s and beyond. So we kind of break down these demographic cohorts to see as a county, we're really led, by the millennials. Roughly, a quarter of the population is millennials, and I'm not talking about Generation Z. I'm talking about the adults right here now. So adults, 18 and over. So millennials are the key driver countywide, and also the baby boomers. So if you look at certain submarkets throughout the county, you see in red where the baby boomers are as a higher percentage, and you see that the north submarket and the fringe submarkets, so the Rochester fringe being the 4 townships that surround the city of Rochester. So you see that the baby boomers are certainly dominating that sector, while even in the Byrons and some other communities around the county, you see a pretty strong growth in the millennial generation, which is going to be your first-time home buyers, your move-up home buyers, and your renters. A lot of the case. But as we look forward to the next 5 years, so this slide right here shows you today, 2020, where we're at. You'll see where things shift. And again, we have this millennials and baby boomer growth, but as a percentage, a percent change growth rate, you'll see that the senior demographics are growing the fastest. And again, the baby boomers fall that 65 to 74 age cohort range there. But overall, we got substantial growth in that senior sector. And again, that's pretty consistent across the state of Minnesota and the country, for that matter, that you have these high growth rates. The post World War II baby boom in that cohort. But what this indicates is that there are going to be a lot of households needing, alternative housing types, whether it's one level living, downsizing, right sizing, moving to senior housing care, or leaving maintenance free apartments or one level living, patio homes, or whatnot. It's a big driver. So that senior demographic is certainly going to drive a lot of the housing needs in the county in short term for sure, but especially over the next 10, 15, 20 years. That cohort's going to be very large percentage growth rates. So now we're going to kind of shift over to the incomes. So incomes, very important as we look at housing costs and what's attainable. what's affordable. You see that, the incomes do range throughout the county. Certainly, the Rochester fringe market, those large lot, suburban style subdivisions and acreage has the highest household incomes in the county, pushing, 111, $112,000. But overall, as a county, we have pretty strong incomes across the board. Uh, the lowest being in Stewartville, but real strong incomes in that Pine Island area, North Sun Market, Byron area, even going east. You know, strong household incomes certainly above state of Minnesota averages and on par with the Twin Cities metro area. But as we look at where these incomes are broken down by age cohorts, kind of see where things are at. So, like this is this is a 2013 versus 2020, not projection, 5-year projection, but you'll see what's happened over the past 7 years, so to speak, with incomes. You've had some very, very strong growth. So this chart here just kind of shows you that the change over that 7-year spread, how that incomes have increased by each age cohort. You really see that 35 to 44, 45 to 54, Gen Xers had some really, really substantial income gains during this past 7-year spread, and that 45 to 54 cohort and millennials are really almost the same. You got millennial household incomes that are very strong, nearly at that slightly higher demographic. So very strong incomes. And of course, they're weighing as people start to leave the workforce, 55 plus, so retiring 65 plus, and you see they come down pretty quickly after the senior age breaks and whatnot. But overall, very, very solid median incomes and growth over the past 7 years since the last study we completed. One thing we wanted to highlight through this report was just some of the demographic comparisons. So, how do we compare the demographics, by race, ethnicity, and whatnot? And you'll see that you have really strong incomes in the the white alone, Caucasian, the Asian demographic cohort, very strong incomes, and even the two or more or the American Indian Native Americans have pretty strong incomes. So then you look at that, and then you compare that to the home ownership rates as well. So the key takeaway here is the Black African American wage is about half of the county average, and the home ownership rates are the lowest. 22% home ownership rate versus say 70% plus in some of the other rates. It's a pretty big gap there in the home ownership rate, and which leads to home equity and overall wealth. So it's one thing we want to highlight as we dug into the demographics of the county here. So now we're going to shift over a little bit to talk more about the employment market and commuting trends, and just kind of how the impact of COVID-19 has had an effect on the overall economic sectors. So big picture. Now this chart is for Rochester. It's not for the county, but it's Rochester proper. I mean, as you all know, huge job generator. I mean, a lot of jobs coming in every day. You got roughly 30,000 jobs positive inflow. So substantial number of persons coming into the county every day for employment. Employment hub in Southeast Minnesota, and sort of led by the healthcare sector. But with that, you have very, very strong incomes. I mean, the wages, are actually higher in the metro area. So from a wage standpoint, those wages are pretty substantial uh, as an overall average compared even to the metro. So, um, but I think the key, look at this numbers. The key is it's driven by the healthcare sector, and Rochester proper is driving the wage growth and all the jobs in the county. 93% of all the jobs in Olmsted County are within Rochester proper. But I wanted to highlight some of the COVID changes that have resulted since March, and it's pretty drastic. So you see this next slide here. What has happened since COVID hit? Luckily, Olmsted County and the state of Minnesota have not been hit as hard as nationwide. As you see, as the U.S., we hit over about 13.5% at one time during April and May. But you'll certainly see the impact of COVID and the employment sector. Now, the positive news is these numbers are declining quite substantially month to month. And as of October, which is the latest data available, Olmsted proper was sitting at 3.6% unemployment rate, which is, again, that's a substantially low unemployment rate, which poses challenges for employers looking for staff. But I think the key takeaway is this next slide here. I'll show you here how things shook out in the employment sector, how you see the labor force has changed. So, you see things come along and, to that April data, and the labor force and employment rates certainly took two different paths there. As we see, the number of employed persons went down substantially come, March and April when COVID hit, and we lost, upwards of, 4,000 employed persons in the county. Then, of course, we had summer months. People were hiring again, albeit slowly hiring. Things are starting to bounce back a little bit. But then, as the temperatures have changed, kids got back in school, we're starting to see again those numbers dip again. So we're seeing the employment numbers start to wane a little bit, and a lot of that is really just due to the labor force. We've seen the labor force participation rate dip to its lowest rate in 4 decades. So right now, as of October, so last month, the labor participation rate in the state of Minnesota was just over 6-7%, which is down, quite handily since it was a year ago. So we've had a lot of people leave the workforce. Hence, those people who left the workforce, which really was driving a lot of this unemployment rate down. It's just people are looking for work as like they once were, whether it's homeschooling the kids, they gave up on looking for jobs. But the big takeaway we've found too is just women in the workforce has gone down substantially more than men. So whether they're at home taking care of kids or whatnot, that's been a much bigger factor than men. So we've seen this unemployment rate really drop, but a lot of that is due just to the fact that, again, people may not be looking for work right now. And we estimate in the state of Minnesota that about half of the jobs have come back. So all the job losses we had back in March, April, May, we've recovered about half of those jobs. So that means there's a lot of people on the sidelines yet that are not in the workforce. I think the other key trend that's going to be driving real estate and housing is certainly this working from home momentum that has happened since March, April, where we have roughly 50% now of office workers are still working from home. And that's going to be a trend we're going to continue to see, at least in the short term, at least through this summer of 2021, could be longer. Now, a lot of companies are really not going back to the business as normal, as like we know it, at least for the next, say, 6 months. So, and that's going to certainly affect the housing market and demand for various housing product types. Other couple big things with the employment markets, we've seen the consumer confidence index has ticked down again. It was coming back pretty well over the summer months. But with the uptick in cases and death rate going up and pulling back, and such a pulling back in the economy right now with various rollbacks, that consumer confidence is declining again, going into the peak holiday season, especially for retail. But the big wild card here is you have a lot of federal benefits that are going to be expiring right after Christmas, December 26th. And if Congress can't strike a deal with a new administration, if you think something will happen, the new administration will be a deal struck. But at least in the short term, we do have big concerns about people losing unemployment benefits, how it's going to affect the economy. So right now, it's a pretty cloudy forecast, pending on how things shake out over the next month and beyond. But the positive news is, there's a lot of speculation already with the potential vaccine. There's 3 manufacturers out there that have are in trial and have pretty good, 90, 95% positive rates as far as testing goes, being effective. So that certainly has some people being optimistic, and stock market reacted to this last week before, when some of these tests were coming back as pretty effective. So a lot going on an economic standpoint. I think a lot's going to be flushed out in the next few months as we know where things are going to head long term. So now we're going to shift over to more talking about various housing markets and touch on the rental housing market, the for sale market, and the senior housing market. We're going to kick things off with just what has happened this past decade. So actually the decade and beyond. It's going all the way back to 2000, so pre-run up in the housing market. So last decade, we had certainly a boom. I mean, the city of Rochester was cranking out new construction right from 2000, 2004, and 05, and things started to wane, 06 and beyond. But we had a huge run up in the for sale market in the first half of last decade. And some of that was certain speculation, no question about it. But production of housing certainly took a 180 turn as we look where things were at last decade, moving to this decade, and things bottomed about 09, 10, 11, and 12. Then going forward to this decade, you see a complete reversal. So last decade, for sale market driven, single family homes, a lot of townhomes, condos were being built, and then not much rental housing was constructed last decade. And then come to this decade, and things started out pretty slow. I mean, things were really slow until about 2015, when the rental houses started to really ramp up. So you see this kind of, it's a 180 approach. We had 3/4 of the production last decade was single family for sale product. By today, half of that roughly is multifamily rental housing, or some senior housing with that as well. And the single family just has not ramped up at all compared to where it was a decade ago. Now, to break down the apartment development, so again, you see what has happened in Rochester, Rochester proper, as far as new deliveries. This is when the project opened, not when a building permit was pulled. It's actually when the project opened. So if it had occupancy days like 2016, we put it into the 2016 category. But you see a lot of new production of rental housing. No shortage of new market rate apartments, and it's been a huge ramp up over the past 5 years is where the bulk of those units has been. And you've also seen some positive movement in the affordable rental as well. So it's seen more traction in the affordable sector, which is positive to see as well. But really, the majority of this product type is certainly a market rate, non-income restricted rental product type. Looking ahead here, this kind of shows again how much construction we had, and you'll see it's pretty substantial as far as market rate. But again, we did have 1,000 units of affordable tax credit projects that were constructed, so that was positive to see as well. But again, massive run up in that market rate apartments. And as we look at over the past, say, 50, 60 years of the product that we inventoried, over 40% of it was built this last decade. So looking from the 60s all the way up to 2020, 40% of that plus was built this past decade. Really, that was built 2016 to 2020. So a pretty substantial amount of rental housing that got delivered in that time. So as we look at the overall rental housing market, so during this process, we inventoried all apartments with 12 or more units in the county. In the county, of course, and those collar communities right outside the county to bring into the submarket. So again, we inventoried all this product type, over 11,000 units total. So again, this is just typical apartments. We're not talking senior housing yet. We're just talking all ages apartments. So over 11,000 units, so a lot of units spread across about 150 properties, give or take. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic going on. So if we look at all the product that was built and in lease up today, we have a pretty high vacancy rate. You're approaching 10%. There's a lot of new product that's been recently delivered and brought to the marketplace that needs to be absorbed. So to look at that dynamic going on, we have a high vacancy rate across the county. However, when we back out those units that are, say, recently completed, or they're still in that kind of initial lease up process, which takes time to absorb the new product in the marketplace, the vacancy rate looks pretty decent considering the amount of inventory out there. However, it's still going to take time to absorb all these units. So 9.5% vacancy rate, that's certainly going to go down, but we still need some time to absorb all of this new product that got delivered to the market over the past, say, 18 months, give or take. That applies both to market rate and affordable. So even the affordable product type had a little bit higher vacancy rate, not bad by any means, but 6.2% was the vacancy rate we profiled. But again, some of those projects were new projects. If we back those out, we're sitting at sub 3%, which is very, very competitive market for affordable product type. And then we move to the subsidized product types. So subsidized housing meaning Section 8, public housing, 30% AMI. That vacancy rate is pretty much, you can't find anything. I mean, it's 1% vacancy rate, long waiting list. And that's pretty typical with subsidized housing. So the interesting dynamic going on here. Overall, the market is at equilibrium if we, back out some of this new construction. But there's good, still got to take some time here to slowly lease up some of the new product type. So this next slide here just kind of shows where rents have gone. So because we've had this big run up in the market rate sector, which is certainly catered to the move up renter, the or the renter that doesn't necessarily isn't required to rent. They're more of a choice, a lifestyle renter. So we've had a huge run up in rents because of that. So the new product that's being delivered has really brought up all the rents across the city quite substantially across the county. I mean, every submarket you look at, you had a pretty strong increase in rents between 2013 to 2020. We're saying, roughly 30% increase in that average contract rent over that time spread. So it's a pretty big jump. And that's led by that, that market rate luxury product type, which is certainly higher than, wage growth and household income growth. Now, the next slide is going to show affordable housing. And you'll see even in the affordable sector, we've had a substantial rent growth spread over the last 7 years. So, what's really driving this is the fact that almost all the new affordable product, meaning income restricted, is being built at 60% AMI. We're not seeing 50% or 40 or 30. We're seeing a 60% AMI, which is a quote unquote, workforce housing type rent. So because there's been a lot of 60% AMI product that has been constructed, that too has brought up the overall rents across the county pretty significantly, 37% over 7 years. So again, substantially higher than again wage growth and household income growth. So now we're going to kind of shift to kind of talk about the types of rental housing in the county. But one thing we wanted to stress, I know there's been emphasis on what is the demand for single family rentals in Rochester and the county. So this slide here just shows kind of big picture by submarket, how many units in the county are in either single family rentals or say a townhome or condo structure. So they're inside what we typically call a for sale product type that got converted to a rental. Basically what this says. So you see it's a pretty strong number across the county, just county-wide, 27% plus of all the rental housing in the county falls in that single family rental or that townhome type, product type. So pretty high. Yeah, it varies by submarket. And not surprisingly, the Rochester Fringe has the highest just because of the way the townships are zoned. Multi-family is not permitted use in a lot of those township geographic areas. So you have a pretty high number there as far as single family rentals. But again, it's a percent. It's not a hard number there. But pretty strong demand still for people who desire a detached structure in the rental market. So next slide just breaks down the city of Rochester a little bit further. So this current slide I have on the screen right now is sourced to the Census Bureau, ACS. You see a slight discrepancy between numbers. So in this particular slide in front of you, we're saying 24%, 24.5% of Rochester is in the single family sector. Whereas this next slide here, this is sourced to the city of Rochester, where you see 26% of all of the licensed units in the city of Rochester fall within either a single family townhome, condo, or a duplex unit. So a duplex, up down, or twin homes, side by side, 26%, or basically just over a quarter of all the rental units in the city of Rochester are in these, more detached type structures, or structures that were previously a, maybe an ownership type uh, homestead status. But I wanted to just kind of showcase that this is not, it's pretty typical to see this. I want to show a slide out there to show that majority of this product type is really owned by small investors. And I mean small investors, I mean very small investors. They own one or two properties. Maybe they purchased last decade after the Great Recession, when real estate was depressed, and it was a lot more individual investors who purchased properties, or maybe they bought it for themselves. They kept it. They decided not to sell it, kept it as a rental. Well, you see that just the big trend is that single-family rentals in America are really owned by small, mom and pop type investors across the board. 88% of all single-family rentals in the U.S. are owned by, a property owner investor that has a portfolio of, 1 to 10 single-family homes, but that is really more like one for the most part. I mean, most of probably fall in the 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 3 type range. It just shows you how it's still, small, I call it the mom and pop investors, whereas institutional investors have started to enter the sector, but they really haven't gained much traction yet. I mean, there are a few big companies out there today nationally that are going after this sector, but it's still a pretty small percentage of the overall sector, as it is, the local players that are renting out the single family stock. All right, so that just touch on some of the single family rental trends here, and and nationwide that kind of cross over until some of the trends we've seen in Rochester as well. That a lot of those single family rentals were small owners. So, a few slides back, we touched on, the whole rental supply. Of all the rental supply, we had, 11,000 plus units that we inventoried. So during the course of that, the challenge we completed was, okay, we looked at all the market rate housing in Olmsted County, and you would adjust it for, say, unit size, unit type, the rents, what really is called NOAH. So NOAH is a term that we use called naturally occurring affordable housing. It simply means that it's housing that does not have income guidelines. So, there's no government mandate on it, but yet it's affordable just through typical age of structure. It's built 50, 60 years ago. It's old, doesn't have today's updates. It's just, maybe has some challenges in it or whatnot. But we just want to get a handle on what percent of your market rate stock is quote unquote affordable. So once we adjusted all of the market rate units in the county, we found that 70%, which is a huge number, 70% of your rental stock is considered NOAH, which is naturally occurring affordable, which is a pretty high. And if you look at that chart there, you'll see that the bulk of that really falls in at 50% AMI. Is this kind of sweet spot where a lot of that product falls. So a lot of the stock out there is considered quote unquote affordable. The challenging in front of us is how do you maintain that affordability. We'll touch on that a little bit later down the road, but the stock is certainly out there in the marketplace today that is considered NOAA. So I just want to touch on a couple of big trend pictures. So no doubt about it, rental housing has been, the preferred asset class in the commercial real estate sector over the past decade. It's a leading product type coming out of the recession. That's strong growth, led just demographically. We have two strong demographics at play that have been driving this boom. And with that, we've had a lot of lifestyle renters, i.e., renters that may make really high dollar amount of money, and but they just choose to rent. They don't want to buy. They choose to rent. So that's been the key driver in this apartment boom that we've been seeing. And it's all amenity driven, all the bells and whistles. Everyone's trying to outdo each other as far as what they can deliver as far as latest and greatest, common amenities and unit amenities and whatnot. But the trend has been certainly been to decrease unit sizes while to maintain affordability. So you're giving up your square footage of a unit. In return, you get more common area space to be, utilized for, a gym, fitness area, dog park, you name it, whatever that would be. But this rental market boom has probably been led by just the lack of supply for sales sector, i.e., no inventory, has really driven some of it. People are still on the sidelines. And I just a couple quick points, just that we're starting to see hospitality, the verbal short-term stays, Airbnbs. They're making a push into the rental market, and it's going to shake things up here. So it's a very interesting time. Like I said, that market's been hit hard during COVID, but I think long term, that part of the sector is going to be a strong. Interesting to see how that shakes out. So a quick summary: we're in a big boom right now, but with this boom comes concessions, as it's got a lot more competitive among the landlords to fill units. A lot of landlords have said typically they're always full, and they always had waiting lists, and now today there's vacancies, and they're having to give away 3 months rent. Depending on the product type, maybe 1 to 2 months free rent, free parking, keeping rents at bay, just to be competitive in the marketplace today. A lot of products are offering some carrots, so to speak, to keep a stabilized occupancy. We do see, again, strong NOAA inventory and strong demand for single-family rentals. I think the big wild card here is property taxes, as we've seen so much new development over the past 5 years. What it's done, it's brought up the property tax for everybody. So it doesn't matter who you are today. If you own an older Class C building, they're going to assess a lot higher today than they were in the past. So then, the question is, what do we do? If you're a landlord of, say, some single-family rentals or other, older Class C rentals, the taxes go up. You got to pass that along. So there has been a lot of concern from the property managers and developers that property taxes are cutting into the ability to offer or maintain affordability, so to speak. So housing cost burden. This is a concept we use when we talk about anyone who is paying more than 30% of their income, gross income, to housing. So these numbers, have been continuing to trend upwards, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One reason is affordability factors, and being priced out of the marketplace has caused people to pay more for rents, as well as lifestyle renters as well have chosen, so to speak, to pay more in rent, um, and get some of the lifestyle amenities in these new luxury apartments. So that kind of screwed up the numbers as well. But overall, the numbers are, a little bit higher than the state average. You look at cost burden numbers versus the state of Minnesota, 48 versus 41. So they're definitely higher than, the state of Minnesota average. This is a metric we like to, monitor, so to speak, to see where affordability is falling in regard to someone who wants to, keep it at 30% of their income housing. All right, we made it through rental housing. We're going to shift to the senior housing market. So senior housing, we're really referring to products that are age restricted, that are kind of highlighted in the chart you see in front of you, that have, it can be 55 plus, 62 plus, 65 plus, yet they, could be no services all the way up to assisted living, memory care housing. So typically skilled nursing does not fall within senior housing per se, but when we're talking about senior housing, we're talking just housing with services, or it could be just active adult product type with few or no services. So look at Olmsted County. We inventoried over 3,000 units across the county, so across 54 properties, and we were actually really surprised how low the vacancy rates were, despite calling these facilities during COVID. I mean, what's happened in most markets across the country is, families were pulling loved ones out of senior housing during the pandemic, just due to, being concerned about their loved one getting affected or have a shared room or whatever the situation may be. You had vacancy rates shot up. Actually, vacancy rates nationwide are at an all-time high for senior housing today, when we're hovering 85% occupancy, just as people pull the loved ones out of senior housing. But what we found when we called all these properties was the opposite. We were actually shocked to see a sub 2% vacancy rate across Olmsted County, which this is just kind of blew us away that it'd be that low despite this pandemic that's going on, and some of the PR that senior housing has received during the pandemic, as people associate skilled nursing home with senior housing, which really is not the case, but there's this perception of it, and a lot of people pull their loved ones, out of facilities. But overall, very low vacancy rates. The majority of product is in the city of Rochester, not a big surprise. You got to be closer to healthcare. But the interesting fact that there's no affordable in the county. I know there's a couple projects in the pipeline right now, but as of right now, there's no existing affordable senior housing in the marketplace, which will hopefully be met real soon here. But as we look at where things are today versus what we projected back in 2013, the left column shows active adult, meaning no services. Acts like a traditional building, could be a senior co-op, could be a rental, and the right side being to provide services like meals, care assistance, whatever that would be. Pretty much all the product that's been delivered since 2013 has been in that service-based housing, not targeting active adults. So the product type that is being delivered today is the more service-intensive product, whereas active adult is on the horizon. I mean, the demand today really is for active adult independent. The product that's been delivered has been for more service-based. So, and we'll show you, talk about some of these numbers, demand. Um, but as we look at the for sale market and the rental market, so the blue column is what we projected in 2013, and the red on the right is what's delivered. You'll see the for sale market, kept up pretty well. It didn't quite deliver enough units. But as we look at the rental market, it really, blew out the water of demand projections as rental housing went through this major shift to be the preferred asset class in the commercial real estate sector. So the rental demand really shot up, quite significantly uh, between 2013 and 2020. All right, so now we're going to shift gears again and jump over to the for sale market. Keep things moving here. So for sale market today, I mean, here to describe it, you could say red hot. I mean, despite the pandemic and COVID-19, we have a red hot real estate market today. Uh, you know, across the board, it's the supply is at an all-time low. Yet you have days on market. Things are going off. You put a house up for sale, it's gone in a week. Multiple offers, real strong appreciation, and basically what we found was that when the shutdowns happened back in the spring, all that demand got pushed forward. So our fall has been really strong up to this point, at least. We had a really, really strong market. So, strong appreciation. That appreciation is definitely higher than wage growth and household income growth. As you see, those numbers have, really gone north since bombing out in 2011 and 12. Pretty substantial growth in the for sale market. So this chart just shows you where the pricing is today, and it's kind of well, I don't want to say it's misrepresented, but the pricing, because there's so much spec housing that was under construction and new construction, that the pricing gets skewed toward the higher price points because we had a lot of spec construction included into the active listings. So you'll see that over a quarter of the listings were new construction. Again, this number is back to May, so we're back in the springtime, just coming out of some of the stay-at-home mandates. But the key takeaway is the majority of the product type is at the high price point, and there's not a whole lot of inventory. Sub 200 is pretty limited. Any sub 200 price point is going to be, gone within hours, so to speak. If we look at new construction pricing, you certainly see the gap in the metro area has shrank substantially. So historically, Olmsted County was a lot more affordable than the metro area for new construction pricing. I may see a gap even in 2015 with a 40% spread between the cost of a new home, and today that spread has dropped to 15%. So you're seeing that gap really shrink as things really ramp up and are almost in line with construction costs in the Twin Cities area. As we look at where that product type is at today, so we calculated there's approximately 90 subdivisions throughout the county marketing. Now, when we say actively marketing, we're meaning they're newer, maybe platted in the past since 2005 or so to today, and they're actively marketing. Not like ghost platters, sitting empty. They're actually trying to market. But I think if you look at that, where the product is, I mean, it's clearly single family dominated. not a whole lot of attached product. You see more and more, villa product and slab on grade, which is good to see. But again, it's really single family dominated, not a whole lot of twin homes, townhomes, rows, or condos being built. And that chart really shows the price premium for new construction today. It's pretty substantial. I mean, across the board, even Byron 400,000 plus, Rochester Fringe was 450 plus. Pretty substantial housing values in the construction side. And that's really ramped up. So as we looked at, what's marketing today, how many vacant lots are there, majority of vacant lots are within Rochester proper or in the townships of Rochester. Basically 3/4 of lots are located there. But I would say the lots, they're going fast. We're depleting our lot supply today, and the lots that are being delivered are smaller subdivisions, phase one step at a time. It's just not a whole lot of larger subdivisions moving forward, or any larger builders taking on a greater risk in platting larger subdivisions. So it's pretty smaller subdivisions that are moving forward in most cases. And of course, the price varies considerably based on location, but Rochester Fringe having the highest lot costs in the county. So a question we often get asked is, how come no one's building, say, sub 200,000 homes, or why is the entry level missing? And this is a whole other topic in itself. A lot of reasons, but a lot of those bullet points outlined are items that lead to higher construction costs and development costs, which is why we're not seeing virtually any homes being built minus that 200 or 250 price point, minus a couple subdivisions that may have first homes is involved with to help bring down some costs or do land lease type situation. Other than that, nothing is being built at that entry level price point. And one of the big challenges we have today is just this whole idea of lumber. As we look at what's happened in this COVID era, of demand has been driven up so much for remodeling projects, high demand for new construction, and of course everyone's staying at home, wanting to fix up their homes, and at the same time, production facilities at the front end of COVID shut down. The lumber yards weren't producing as much, softwood as they anticipated a big recession. So it really ramped up lumber costs, which is really impacting the bottom line today. I mean, if you look back to September, we're being quoted that a typical multi-family rental unit, to say an apartment, to say 700 square feet, was costing $6,000 more extra, just a lumber cost, not other costs. It's just a lumber. That's pretty substantial. I mean, the typical single family home was up like 16,000. So, that certainly impacts the bottom line and affordability. And again, these numbers have come down since September, but they're still substantially high, which is going to affect the end purchase price and affordability factors for all types of housing. These will get under control here. So, what are some ways we can alleviate some of these high pressure points as far as construction costs, development costs, whatnot? We won't go through all these, but there's certainly ways that can contribute to providing more, more density, fast tracking permitting process and whatnot. A lot of you know programs could be initiated to help address some of these issues. I think one thing we're seeing right now is post-COVID is ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Adding a uh, separate unit on your single family lot for say a college student, a older adult who needs help and whatnot. There's been certainly a big run up of demand for those ADU units in this COVID area um, recently. And on the right side there, I think we like modular housing a lot. We're hoping that this can really take off as a new plant and called Rise Modular in Owatonna. So we're hoping they can continue to ramp up and start delivering a product that's just more cost efficient, so that some of these housing costs can start to be alleviated. So pipeline. We talked a lot about apartments, and there's still a lot of apartments in the pipeline. To look at what's moving forward, for all the various local governments. Again, this is dated back to second quarter, but a lot of projects were in the pipeline, whether that's initial phases, they've gone to planning commission, or just it's still kind of gotten approvals but needs building permit or whatever that would be. There's still a lot of rental housing in that pipeline. And some affordable housing too. It's good to see. We have a fair amount of affordable housing in the pipeline as well. That will, certainly help be a nice needed product type in the marketplace. But not a whole lot other than rental housing. I mean, there was not a whole lot of new plats as far as these subdivisions or senior housing. Pretty light. So rental housing is still leading the charge here, at least in the short term. And we'll see what all goes forward. It's very well may be that some of these projects go on hold as they wait to see how this pandemic flushes out and how the economy comes back. All right, so we went through some of the drivers of housing demand and the demographics. We went through the supply side in the market overview. Now I want to dump into what did we find? What's the need for housing across the county over the next decade? Okay, so now we're going to just dive into some of the numbers. So it's maybe kind of tough to see on your screen, but you'll see that, no surprise, Rochester really the driving force here as well demand is. But it's broken out by submarket, and I'll just keep moving forward here on the next slides to kind of zoom in more on these particular submarkets and where that demand is at. So big picture. So over this decade, the 2020s, we see a need of 18,000 new production housing units in the county. And you'll see where that's divvied up between the product types. I think the interesting one is that senior housing is off the charts, and that's really being demographic driven. Why there's so much senior housing. As we look at where the senior housing is at this next slide, you'll see it's pretty spread out, but a lot of it is in active adult and affordable. So affordable rental, 1,000 plus units, active adult rental, meaning senior housing, no services, is really the sweet spot in the marketplace. And it's all just being driven by demographic growth. I mean, the strong demographics, the baby boomers. So it's the young seniors where the demand is at least in the short term. And as we get closer to say 2030 or even 2025 and beyond, that's when we see this more service enhanced product type really kicking off. But right now, at least for the next 5 years, it's really active adult, independent living driven. So as we look at the various product types, the demand and the need, we kind of break it down by each submarket where the bulk of the need is at. And again, Rochester Yeah, I think the theme is Rochester accounts for roughly 3/4 of all demand in most of the recommended housing product types, whether it's senior for sale side or the rental side. But as we look at the for sale side, I mean, ideally we like to see a 3, ideally 5 year supply of vacant developed lots. This means that's a lot that's been platted. Maybe the streets are in, gutter infrastructure is in place, and there's vacant lots that are readily available for a buyer or builder to come purchase and start construction. So as we look at the lot supply, I think some of the submarkets met that lot supply, but Rochester in particular is pretty light. I mean, they're just meeting it, just barely meeting that 3-year lot supply threshold. So Rochester will definitely need more platted, shovel-ready lots to meet this projected housing demand. So I mean, lots, and the process takes, it can be 18, 24-month process sometimes to get things moving, if not even longer. So we got to be thinking now and into the future to get more of these lots, readily available to meet this demand. Otherwise, there won't be the opportunities and the options to capture, single family demand. But as far as price points, certainly there's demand across all price points, and entry level certainly would be the sweet spot, but it's very, very, very challenging to meet that $200,000 price point. So a lot of this demand is really going to fall, that 350, 400 at best, for new construction, unless of course there is a multifamily component, which we have here, which talks about, this would be a, twin home, townhome, detached villa, could be a condo, a row home. We really find that this product is severely lacking in the marketplace today. I mean, this product was red hot back in 04, 05, and the run up in the housing market prior to the recession. But we just have not had a whole lot of supply in this realm, and this really becomes your affordable for sale housing, because you can do it through the densities. You can get a much more affordable price point, hitting those higher density numbers. So we would really, really like to see more association maintained product type in the county. It can be a variety of product types, whether it's, like again, mentioned a bunch of twin homes, villas, detached, you name it. But I think there's also a strong demand for condos, especially downtown in the Rochester CBD. It's an excellent location for condos, and we at Maxfield have talked to several developers about that, and we've tried to help some developers along on that product type. They just haven't been able to pull the trigger on that. But we'd love to see a downtown Rochester condo project come to fruition. Rental housing. So over the next decade, we're showing 5,000 units. So again, pretty robust rental housing. But again, I'll stress it's a spread out over a decade. It's not all front loaded. It's say 2020, 2022. This is over a decade. So we want to make sure that this product is delivered over the course of time, not all front loaded. But as we look at rental housing, again, not a surprise. The last couple slides show that Rochester could get 75% of the demand for sale side, but moving to rental, it's a little different. We see Rochester certainly as the preferred location. Upwards of 90% of demand can be captured in Rochester proper. So pretty high numbers for the Rochester proper. But I would stress too that all the other communities throughout the county definitely need new rental housing, whether it's a townhome style or traditional multifamily, 3-story, whatever that would be. There's definitely a need for more rental housing across every community in the county. But Rochester certainly will be the driver, just based on jobs and the demographic cohorts that we want that more urban living. So let's move to senior housing. So again, the senior housing boom is being really led by that active adult product, no services, and being led by affordable products. So those two are the big drivers here, but pretty substantial demand for senior housing. I mean, those numbers are pretty off the charts as far as as they model it out where that demand could be. And a lot of it is just not a whole lot of supply in those sectors today. There's not a whole lot of active adult rental or for sale opportunities for seniors. So they they're looking to downsize. They move, they very well could be moved to traditional apartment association maintained rental. So pretty strong demand, across most products, but again, it's leaning to independent and active. We don't see as much demand for the service enhanced, at least in short term. Service enhanced would be strong, later in the decade, it would really be taken off, but in the short term, at least, it's not as high. And that's pretty typical in most markets today. Most markets across the state of Minnesota, that assisted living tends to be pretty well met, and a lot of product falls into assisted living, and it's a pretty competitive marketplace, whereas the other products have a lot more opportunity. The key takeaways. Again, last decade, we had very strong growth, 16% growth rates. We continue to see that going forward. That growth is really spread across the millennials and the senior population, but that senior population as a percentage is where things are going the fastest. Quick comment about household types is that a fair amount of households are either empty nesters, never nesters, or single. So 60% of your households in Rochester proper fall within those two categories. So which typically means they desire a smaller housing units, downsizing, right sizing, and they don't need that single family home with 4 bedrooms, 3 bath, 2-car garage. As we look at incomes, again, strong household incomes, wages that are actually higher than the metro area. We've been in this massive rental housing boom, and vacancy rates are at equilibrium now, but we do have some little softening out there with concessions as people compete to fill units. But we do have a very high number of NOAA units in the marketplace today. Like at senior housing, we see that senior housing market is really outperforming where most markets across the country today, just due to those low vacancy rates, considering the current situation we're in today. So it's very, very positive for the senior housing market with its for sale side. It's on all cylinders going forward. Things are hot. The market just continues to chug along. The biggest concern is lack of supply and affordability. The new construction side, we're just not seeing supply keep up with demand. We really need more production. Production across the board is needed to help meet the growing demand. But with that, we need lots. We need lots before we can get the house being constructed. So we need to get some more lots in the pipeline so we can start moving that through the system, get those platted, ready to go for future housing starts. And we'll end on COVID-19 hasn't majorly impacted the housing market. It's definitely impacted the housing market, but it has not had the impact that we thought it would when this pandemic started. it's actually outperformed in every regard. So we were pleasantly surprised there. Um, just comment on the subpar housing. Our senior demand is very off the charts, and we just have not had a whole lot of senior housing production in Olmsted County. I think one of the challenges today we have is, just due to the lack of supply, seniors are staying in their homes longer, and they don't want to downsize necessarily because there's nowhere to go, or where they want to go is priced too high. So hence, they're staying in their homes longer than previous generations, which then holds back the rest of the real estate market as you just see that the supply is not there in the marketplace for the millennials. So it's very interesting the dynamic going on with the senior housing population as they continue to stay in their homes and not necessarily want to move. I said earlier, no question about it, the for sale market has been struggling to meet demand over the past decade. We are still nowhere near where we were prior to the Great Recession. Again, there was some speculation prior to the Great Recession, but taking that out, we're still not producing enough single-family homes or multi-family homes. Now, especially that first-time home buyer, whether that's met in a split level, single family or a townhome or a condo, just not being met today. As new construction costs have just gone off the roof. We just do not have really much of anything for attached developments. We got some, cottages and twins and detached villas going, but no, say attached real homes or condos. Could certainly use more density in the for sale sector. I like to say that the 4 L's really constrain affordability. Plus the regulatory laws, land, labor, and lumber, those are really to drive it. Hence the challenges in that entry-level price point. And it's interesting, despite this pandemic, the resale market's at an all-time high for transaction volume, appreciation, and the for sale market housing starts nationwide too have also jumped to an all-time high since like 2006. So people are out there buying and building new homes, although we're still in this pandemic. The apartment boom, again, let's touch on this. We consider ourselves at equilibrium today. After you adjust for those projects and lease up, we're pretty high as a soft market. So we'll see more concessions until those new projects reach stabilized occupancy. Then again, we do see just more challenges in that market rate product type as it targets the luxury move up renter, not the affordable renter, just due to the fact that all these development costs sort of drive up the overall price point for rental housing. And we're seeing hospitality moving into the rental space, especially in Rochester with the Mayo Clinic. A lot of opportunity for short-term rentals targeting Mayo patients, Mayo patients and their families, or just other people who need short-term stays. That I think we're going to see a lot more movement in that sector once things shake out with the COVID situation. I think one thing we need to really stress is we have a lot of no-off product type out there today. 6,000 plus units, affordable at 60% AMI or less. Most of those are actually 50% AMI. The question is how you maintain that affordability. And because really they are serving as affordable housing today, but that could change due to speculation, investors or whatnot. And the thing I have to stress is it's a lot more economical to provide NOAA housing stock versus new construction. I mean, new construction affordable housing it's not cheap. You're north of $200,000 a door at a minimum these days, whereas the preservation of NOAA can be completed for a fraction of that, and you can maintain that affordability. So we really like to see emphasis on that, maintenance of the NOAA stock, because you get more bang for your buck, trying to get a lot more households versus new construction. Move forward, COVID impacts. I think the big picture certainly is, people are working at home, and today people have the opportunity to really live anywhere. So the opportunities have really been expanded for a lot of communities, especially communities on the fringe, communities outside the metro area. You've seen this massive movement from the metro, home sales. Look at home sales in outstate Minnesota; they're off the chart. Whether it's lake country or rural or ag land, you're seeing people move out to desire this more space and more affordability. So this is a movement we think is going to continue to have some legs as people have more options. The new normal, maybe we go into work a couple of days a week, and you can, maybe take on a longer commute for those couple of days a week. So it really expands your ability to capture a much larger geographic area for housing, which we think, certainly benefits a lot of the Olmsted County market. But just other big trends we're seeing is just, the demand for more space, more outdoor space, touching on ADUs. On the apartment side, this push to more exterior entrances versus a corridor-loaded building is big, or having more exits and entrances in a corridor-loaded building, because people want to have other options for maybe not running into people in hallways or whatnot. So COVID certainly has changed the dynamic for design, what people desire in housing as they move forward. Just wanted to take a couple quick minutes on where we go from here. So a question I get for the past few weeks has been, how has the election, or how will the election affect housing and real estate markets, and what's going to happen? If we can all agree, we're happy the election is over after a long, drawn out election that's not go away. But really it's going to come down to Georgia and how that plays out, whether or not President Biden gets to really push his agenda. If you go online, you search the Biden housing plan, you can find it. Kind of outlines his priorities. But at least in the short term, we're really hopeful. Congress still has not got a second stimulus bill done. Maybe they can still make it happen. I don't know, but it should happen in 2021 early to help keep the economy afloat. With the Biden housing plan, real big picture, it's a 10-year plan, $640 billion. A lot of money towards affordable housing, especially helping out first-time home buyers. Another key component of this plan is helping out Section 8. Right now, huge waiting list of Section 8 vouchers, and the reality is, majority of people have to wait years and years and years to get those vouchers and to fund that program. I think he will probably extend the Trump administration's eviction moratorium. Likely would happen. It's been a push to keep Fannie and Freddie. There's been a push to move them to the private sector, but that probably will not happen now under the Biden administration. And I think another thing that could happen is some of these trade tariffs could weigh in, especially with Canada and soft lumber. Prices on the lumber could help bring down some costs for lumber. Now, the flip side of it all is, we got two sides to everything. And from a investor standpoint or anyone who has real estate holdings is concerned over the 1031 exchange, being to buy and sell real estate and move it to another asset and defer those gains. It could be changes to opportunity zones, what could happen in environmental regulations, or deregulation issues. And this this lumber issue comes up again too. Could there be more restrictions on how much lumber could be harvested, in the U.S. and that could drive supply down as well. So a lot of things at play. No one knows what's going to happen. I think again comes out of Georgia, but just generally speaking, housing markets, mortgage market, and say a lot of Wall Street, Main Street would probably prefer a split Congress versus one-party rule, just more comfortable, and they just makes investing the unknown a lot easier. So we'll see what happens. A lot moving on, moving parts there. So 2021, we do see, a lot of, I guess, uncertainty yet, but I guess the wild card is what happens here with the vaccine, future shutdowns, that kind of stimulus. But we do see mortgage rates should not really fluctuate. I mean, we'll see them uptick a little bit. We do consider continued supply constraints, inventory challenges. Good news is we have two strong demographics: the millennials and the boomers, which are going to drive a lot of real estate. We see this working from home will continue to be strong. We see land and construction costs will continue to be a challenge, especially due to supply constraints today. Shipping, you name it, from other countries is still a challenge to ship appliances today. It's really tough to get appliances, doors, interior doors, you name it. Still a lot of challenges, but overall, the for sale market should be another strong year. But then again, there's a lot of uncertainty. And one thing certain is uncertainty, I guess, for 2021. So what I like to do is we cover a lot of ground, a lot of information. Again, that housing report, like I said, was 375 pages long, a lot to digest. So what I like to do is just kind of open up this Q&A and give people's comments, questions, feedback, etc. And we can kind of walk through some of your questions. So at this time, I guess I'll pass it back and you can open it up.
Hey, great. Thanks, Matt. So I'll start by kind of going back. There's a little bit of a queue of questions, and I'll just read those out loud one at a time, Matt. And if folks want, you can continue posting those in chat, either to everyone or to me, either way, and then I'll read those off. And then once we're through those, we can just kind of keep going from there, if that sounds good. Okay.
That sounds good. If you want to read those off, Jeremy, we'll just roll with it here.
Okay, sounds good. All right. I've just got to find the the first ones in the queue here. Okay, great. And there were a couple questions sort of on this general topic, so I'll read this one, and I think your answer will probably answer the other couple that were on this. So 60% AMI as a guideline means that almost 2/3 of our households need affordable housing. Isn't that really a big market that really needs more attention than those who can afford what we call market rate? And a couple other questions kind of talked about that AMI piece. What does that really mean? And since it's an average and not a mean, kind of our community with a relatively high wages, kind of how does that impact those numbers as well?
Well, yeah, I'll kick off with starting about So majority of new affordable housing development that is constructed today, that's, pretty much everywhere in the state of Minnesota, tends to fall at 60% AMI, area median income. The challenging part we have today is that's where a lot of the tax credit programs, LIHTC programs through the Minnesota State Housing Finance Agency really target. However, what we find is the demand is actually highest if we go lower down that scale, so to speak. So for example, 50% AMI would have a substantially higher demand than 60% AMI because you have a lot more larger pool of renters. The challenging part we have in Rochester is, as you touched on, Jeremy, is you have high wages. And those high wages bring up the overall income guideline requirements for the county because all these numbers are based on county averages. Hence, a person, I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but 60% AMI, two-person household, if they're working, a job making 15, 20 bucks an hour, they may not qualify for, say, a affordable housing unit at 60% AMI. Now, if you were to adjust those numbers down, you would certainly have demand. I'd say at 50% AMI, that person would qualify. But I think the dynamic we've got going on right now is majority of the affordable housing being delivered today that is at that higher AMI, and we're obviously happy to see that, but we'd like to see more housing stock being delivered at other lower AMI requirements to really capture that greater need.
Okay, great, thanks, Matt. Let's see, next question. If lots are costing around $75,000 on average, then few folks besides developers can afford to buy a lot, even with a mortgage, much less custom build a home while paying rent. Do lots get sold with mortgages? If so, how many years are they allowed to pay? So I guess this is kind of getting at just, with lot prices this high, even developers might have a hard time affording to build it.
Yeah, good question. I think the challenging part of lots is a lot of banks don't like to lend on lots. So if you're a home buyer who wants to build a new home, and say you want to hold a lot, and say it's for example, it's 75,000. Well, a lot of the banks don't like to lend on the lot. There's no collateral there. They want to tie that lot to a house. So, if you're going to pursue that lot, it's either one or two options. It's going to be cash, which is a lot of money, or two, you have to roll it into a package and you're going to finance a construction loan on that house and land package. Now, if you have a $75,000 lot, the rule of thumb is, your lot cost should be like, just say 20% of the final purchase price of the home. And there's some movement in there, depending on premiums or whatnot. But so if you've got a $75,000 lot, the next thing you know, you're at 300 before you know it. So yeah, it's very, very difficult to build an affordable price point home when you're 75 in off the get-go. That leaves you little room at all, for the actual construction of the home. So it's a big challenge today. And we touched on some of those for sale slides about the new subdivisions being smaller, and that's exactly why, because developers don't want to bite off 100 lot subdivisions. They may have done that pre-2005 during the run-up of the real estate market, but everyone's been so gun shy since then that people are just taking bits and pieces off and doing small subdivisions just due to that risk. It's a big, you know, upfront investment on that builder developer standpoint. They don't want to hold that land. So hence our lot supply is dwindling and not keeping up with you know, future demand projections.
Great, thanks, Matt. Next question, are there any theories or reasons why the current and projected construction of new twin homes, townhomes, etc. are so low?
Back up again, Jeremy, why the construction costs or the?
Just the actual projected construction of, or existing, current and projected construction of specifically twin homes, townhomes, I imagine condos as well, is so low.
Yep. Well, you know, we did find pretty strong demand. You know, typically in most markets, depending on the market, you know, maybe it's 80-20, give or take, leading single family being 80 and 20%, you know, for sale multi. And of course, it varies by sub-market and in each individual market. But we just have not had much production of that multi-family product this past decade. And there's a number of reasons why. I mean, from the get-go, we'll talk about the condos really quick. We would love to see more condos. I mean, great product type. We think that the market's there for it. The challenging part with condos is the current state of Minnesota statutory law, now, which was amended, by the way, a few years back, but still a lot of these builders, developers are on the hook for a 10-year time frame for construction defects. So because of that, you know, whether it's the architect, the engineers, you know, various construction companies and subcontractors, they're all on the line for a 10-year spread. They really don't want to touch condos unless there's a really high price point or there's a blanket, you know, assurance type plan across the whole building because they don't want to take that risk. So that's certainly held back, you know, the condo sector. Now, we certainly are seeing a lot more detached villas, you know, cottages, patio homes on small lots, which we certainly welcome. And that could be a slab on grade or it could be a basement, depending on the product type. But, you know, driving around Rochester, Olmsted County, I'm certainly seeing a lot more of that product being built, which is a very popular type of design. I mean, it's popular both with seniors, but, you know, even all ages for that matter, who just maybe want to, you know, don't want the maintenance on the yard or don't need a lot of space. It's just a great product type. So we're certainly seeing a lot of that product type. I think that the piece we're really missing is, you know, row homes, you know, attached product type, because those row homes can really serve a more affordable market, because that is the product type you can build, you know, for a lot less per unit and get your affordability component met. So we'd sort of like to see more of that product being developed as well. But I think, you know, the demand is certainly there. I mean, you look at the demographics, that 55 plus demographic, there's gonna be a lot of need for one level living and other multi-family product types to meet that need over the next decade, because it's only gonna escalate exponentially.
Right. Thanks, Matt. Next question, if builders aren't able to build entry-level single-family housing, what folks could, or what demographic could afford to buy a lot and build either an accessible single-family home or an age-in-place single-family senior housing home? What income would be needed beyond current living costs to build those kinds of homes? So kind of what, you know, if we're not able to build entry-level single-family housing, that's a kind of a standard house, what would it take to build either accessible housing or age-in-place housing? And, you know, maybe an additional question is that possible? without being kind of above market rate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be very challenging, no question about it, to build any kind of new construction. Now, I'm thinking about accessibility. I think of, number one being a one level living type product type. It could be a apartment style, simply a multifamily structure, 3 stories, elevator building. That is probably your most effective way to bring costs down. Now that could be like a senior co-op, which is kind of a blended model. You buy into it, but you still have this rental fee. Senior co-ops are, I think, one of the best hybrid concepts out there today, where they can meet that affordability, and you can still get in at a much more reasonable price point than, say, talking about the single family home. You have a number of senior housing operators that are specialized in the co-ops, and they certainly hit a much lower price point. So that certainly could be an option. Now, we would love to see more senior co-ops as well in the marketplace. We think it's a great product type. But yeah, I think to get your costs down, you typically need density. So we have to spread that cost out over more units. And, that single family home is obviously going to have your highest, say, price per foot over, some of these other product types. It's overall, I should say, not overall price per foot, overall price point, not price per foot. But yeah, I think it's going to be challenging to make an accessible single family dwelling. Now you could pursue, villas, cottages, slab on grade, maybe another land lease type situation, or a partnership with First Homes would certainly help alleviate some of those costs to bring down the overall development fees on that. But it's probably gonna have to move to a more dense type housing structure to be able to bring your affordability into play.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. Hey, Matt, could you stop sharing the screen for a sec so we can go back to the video?
Okay. Let me go back here. Let's end slideshow. Okay.
And then,
You still see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do, hold on one second. Let's do, okay. Here we go. There we go.
Perfect.
All now right. I can see everyone again. All right.
Okay. Next question. Is there additional information that I've missed on our lot supply for development? We've ran these numbers on our end, on the city's end, but are wondering if there's more information on our lot supply. It's mentioned we only have a 3-year supply of buildable lots, and we should have a 3 to 5 year supply.
Yeah, Jeremy. So what we did, we went through all the property tax records throughout the county by every, I'll say, quote unquote, active subdivision. Okay, so we did not look at, say, one-off lots, infill lots. We're talking lots that are available for development, that are, new construction, platted in the past decade, 15 years or whatnot. That we inventoried every single vacant lot across the county to determine which was available lot to build on. So based on those numbers and your current production, which is say, say we're at 350 a year, whatever that number ends up being this year, that depletes your lot supply pretty quick, which means you need more lots in the planning phases right now, whether that's preliminary plats or you move to a final plat. You gotta get some momentum going, soon to bring that lot supply up. And a lot of times what we find too is, builders may have, say, a 3 or 4 phase development, and they're marketing 20 lots today. where they may have another 80 in, phases 3, 4, 5, and 6, or whatever. So they could be potential lots out there, but maybe they're not platted right now. So, we may not count them if they're not, ready, shovel ready and ready to go. So, as of right now, we found lot supply was pretty, I'll count weak, but it's going to be borderline. We got to bring some more lots on, to meet this growing demand. Otherwise, you're not going to meet your housing production goals if you don't have available lots in the pipeline.
Thanks, Matt. Next question is, how do you measure demand for attached type housing? If supply increases, how do you know that demand will increase?
Well, for our demand for attached, for sale or rental, is it? Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I think right now, we modeled a couple different ways. So based on historical trends, we kind of know how many homeowners and how many renters are on the marketplace today, and we trend it based on, okay, we see attached product type certainly is, growing substantially this past decade. So we adjust our projections, based on some of the most recent building permit trends to apply to, our 10-year projection. So, based on projected, pure household growth, turnover, which means people are moving, and preference type, we then apply that to our demand methodology to see what the demand is. Now we see an increase in that attached product, just more so because for affordability reasons, we need more attached product to hit some of the price points we need to hit, because otherwise a single family product is going to be way up here, because we need an attached product in maybe a little more towards that middle. So we actually see our attached demand as a for sale, it's like a for sale, not rental, as a proportion increasing with time, just due to the challenges of developing, single family lots and detached housing, and those price points that keep going pretty strong north.
Let's see. There's a couple questions here that are probably might need to be answered by folks out other than you or Mary, Matt. So I'll go ahead and read those.
Sure.
So how will the city of Rochester or Olmsted County use this housing study to drive policies, and what kind of policies? I don't know if we're ready to answer those questions, but if anyone thinks they may have an answer from the city or the county, please chime in.
I'll invite colleagues from the city to comment as well. Sheila Cascade, I'm one of the Olmsted County Commissioners, so I serve on our HRA board. I also serve on the Housing Coalition. I think we are paying close attention to this study so that we can look to see where some of the housing needs are. And I will just speak for myself. I particularly note the need for senior housing. And we've had conversations before about the way that making affordable housing available for seniors also then opens up the single family housing market for others. So that's a particular focus. We do own a piece of property along Mailwood Road that we divided last year, and Center City Housing is putting up received state bonding funds and is putting up a 30-unit housing for people who need services. But the other half of that property, we will be working on development. And so this study of looking at what the housing needs of the community are, particularly for our lower income folks, because the HRA tends to focus on people whose incomes are at 30% of AMI or below. We'll be looking, I think, at that particularly. I also think then, just wearing my hat for the coalition and for the alliance, we've had the intention for over a year, and COVID got in our way, of completing the Maxfield study and then bringing interested parties together to try and set some broad community goals around housing. Housing isn't going to be solved by government. It's not going to be solved by the private sector alone. It's really going to have to be a collective action for us to accomplish some of these goals. And so we're hoping that, I think Dave Dunn is on this call still. We're hoping that we'll be able to convene a deeper conversation through the Alliance and inviting others into the conversation about what are some goals we can set as a community about our housing needs and who's going to take responsibility for what aspect of meeting that need. So I think that this study frames up our successes and points out some of our challenges and can a lot of policy discussions, including what happens in those neighborhoods that have the most affordable housing. How do we preserve that affordable housing? So to me, this is a good framing document.
Let me add on to Sheila. This is Patrick Keene. I'm on the Rochester City Council. Again, we invested to help try to make the Maxfield study happen, to basically have a better database for where we are with housing. As part of things like the coalition, alliance, we do recognize having a healthy housing market, including affordable housing, as an important aspect to the growth that we want to see in the city and the county and the area. The city takes very much of like working closely with the county as the housing redevelopment, working with the Rochester Area Foundation, working with these partners that are really out front trying to do the housing thing, and we try to participate as a partner with those groups. The other thing that the city is trying to get their arms around with the county, with the coalition, is what is the data that we want going forward. As Sheila points out, senior housing is really jumping off this as a big concern that would make a more healthy housing market. But what are those metrics, or how would we measure whether we're making progress on those in 2021, 2023 and beyond? So those are just some comments. We don't have, based on this study, new goals. We really have to absorb this and kind of take it into our plans as we go forward.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question on, I think this is maybe related to the price of lumber. Are there alternate construction types that we could do, maybe panels or steel, or something that's not using as much lumber to try to decrease the cost of housing? And I guess maybe I would add on to that, do you think this is a long-term or a short-term thing with the lumber prices?
That's an excellent question. I mean, there's no question that we're going to see more, I think, technology come into play, whether it's modular, prefabricated, and other techniques to help alleviate, the building process and material costs. Steel stud construction is very expensive, so that's probably not an option. But I do think that these lumber costs will alleviate. Now, if you look at right now, if you go online, you can look at the futures. See what it's trading at for lumber. They are projecting a decline, but not a substantial decline to next summer. So we still need time for the various lumber yards and whatnot to ramp up production. And the demand has been so strong that in the short term, it's probably going to be another at least 3 or 4 months pretty high cost for lumber, but we do see those falling. The question is how soon and how fast. But yeah, there's no question about it. It's going to affect overall costs. I mean, it's pretty substantial numbers that we're seeing, and that's just one component, right? We're not talking about everything else out there that's been affected by COVID. But I do think you're going to see a lot more innovation happen here. I keep saying modular is on the forefront, and modular has a chance to really start taking off now, especially the multifamily side of things. Help, number one, it brings down the time frame quite substantially, but your waste and whatnot, you can just produce it for less. The traditional stick construction, the challenging part has always been transportation costs. How far is that plant away from your end site? You got to deliver it, and that adds up substantially to your overall cost for the modular to get to the site. But I do think the lumber costs are going to come down. Just maybe, like I said, maybe another 4 months before we see actually some positive results come out of that.
Okay, great. We'll take your word on that, Matt.
I hope so.
Okay, combining kind of a couple questions and comments maybe into one here. So in regards to senior housing, we saw that the active living, there's a kind of a good demand, but very few units, but it's kind of maybe if we build it, they will come sort of a thing. And then we also know that, there's not enough affordable units. Is there a way to kind of really gauge what better gauge, I guess, what the future might be? And then are there certain processes that would help kind of at the city and county levels where we could fill more senior housing needs with ADUs and other kind of smaller attached units?
Well, I'll just kind of comment on the first part there. I do think that we'll see more active adult product type likely come on the horizon. I mean, right now, the Twin Cities, for example, just in this past, say, 1 to 2 years, we've seen interest spike substantially from developers looking to bring active adult senior housing online. As they see the trends, they know that the very forefront of the senior demographic cohort is rising so fast that this is the target market they want to pursue, because a lot of the product type assisted living is pretty competitive yet. I mean, there's a lot of that product is in the marketplace today, and has vacancy rates that are Olmsted are very low, but most markets today have high vacancy rates. So active adult is the next kind of big product type. So we are going to see more of that. I do think Olmsted County will certainly see more interest in that. And I would love to see touched on earlier, a senior co-op, which is kind of the hybrid concept that brings down affordability and would certainly provide, an ownership product at a very affordable rate that a lot of households can afford. But I think the big thing that jumped out to us was certainly the lack of just affordable housing. I mean, affordable senior housing in Olmsted County was pretty much zero or none. So that is certainly a product that needs to be a high priority, I think, is targeting seniors with, modest to middle incomes, for that matter, that can afford affordable senior housing. Now, the state of Minnesota has gotten better with, the tax credit process and started to consider senior housing projects as that. And historically, it didn't until, past few years. But you are seeing more senior housing developments apply for the tax credit process and chasing, some of those dollars. So I think you'll see more of that as well. But as of right now, we definitely undersupplied, and we certainly want to see more production for that modest to middle income senior, because it's just not getting that today.
And then on the ADU side, there was an additional question that came through on do you know of any cities or counties that have done a good job developing ADUs?
Well, I don't know if any cities have developed them per se. I know a lot of cities have zoning codes that address them, but yeah, I can't think of any cities that have actually found a way to promote and develop ADUs. Now, this COVID market we're in today, we've certainly seen ADUs take off substantially. I mean, for example, you think of South Minneapolis. I was just talking to a interior designer a few weeks back, and they were working on, a ton of these things throughout South Minneapolis that where people were either building a home office or a guest house for their college kids or for their family members, um, or they were converting garages, converting the attic and the garage to an ADU, stuff like that. So I do think there's a lot of momentum in this industry. And I've even seen, like, for example, some of these companies that build sheds have now changed their business model to make it more livable, breathable ADU unit, which is a great concept because basically they're taking a shed and they're retrofitting it to be able to plop on a lot to provide, housing for someone. I mean, so I think that's a great concept. But I do think that's going to continue to evolve. But I've yet to see a city that's actually developed it. I do know that zoning codes have changed quite substantially the past few years to allow ADUs, where maybe historically they weren't approved, whereas today to meet housing needs, to meet density needs, cities have certainly loosened their zoning codes to permit ADUs outside, and in some cities we've allowed multiple today. So we're certainly seeing that movement pick up. Now we'll make a huge dent in the overall demand. It'll make a small dent, but it's not gonna make a huge, massive impact on the overall housing market. I think one by one you keep providing housing, but as a percentage, it's still gonna be a pretty small number.
Thanks, Matt. We've seen lot sizes are decreasing. Is that everywhere in the county, and do you see that as a positive development?
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, there's no question lot sizes are decreasing. I mean, a decade ago, you may have seen a standard lot being 80 wide, give or take, and now those have continued to compress just due to a variety of factors. I mean, the biggest factor is affordability. So to be able to deliver that house at a certain price point, developers that increase density, which means they compress lot size. So, I mean, it's a trend we've been seeing for the past decade. And, the new normal, you're seeing 65, 70 wides becoming kind of a lot of new normal for your traditional single family lot. And that's a trend that's going to stay. And we don't see that reversing. I think that's going to continue to make, desire narrow lots, decrease density, so that we can bring that lot cost down to the end purchase price of the home. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I mean, to get more density on the site, bring down pricing. I think it's a trend that's not going to go anywhere. At least for city lots. I mean, it's still going to have demand for, some big lots, not a bunch of townships, but we're talking city lots here. So, yeah, we'll definitely see more compression, I think.
Okay. And do any of the other cities in the county outside of Rochester have larger minimum lot sizes? I don't know if you know or if folks from the county know. No? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what every minimum lot size is, but I imagine the minimum lot size is probably a little bit higher in some of the more rural communities than Rochester proper.
Okay. There's a clarification question on your answer with the ADUs. So ADUs expand single family housing into bigger units, doesn't necessarily add units that can be sold separately or occupied other than renting. Is that the case, or are there cases where ADUs are somehow separated and sold separately from the main house?
Right. I guess, most cases that I'm aware of are you are the same parcel, PID, right? You're not separating a separate legal description for that particular ADU. I have heard of a few cities entertaining that, but I just don't know much about it. But in Minnesota, at least, pretty much everything is one parcel with that ADU on it. So they're not parceling it off on any means.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I would imagine maybe there would be some legal way to turn it into a condo or turn both units into condos or something like that. But yeah, it would be a stretch.
Jeremy, this is Terry. I mean, I think one of the issues with doing that, if you're looking to condo it, is, all the hoops you have to jump through to do a condo. I mean, to provide the condo declarations and common elements and reciprocal easements and whatnot that are needed to accomplish that. I suspect the cost of doing that makes it prohibitive to do that. And to Matt's point, I mean, that's why I think you generally would see them on, one singular property rather than being split off.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I just like just kind of piggyback that thought. I've been working with a client recently on a detached townhome development. Very interesting. It's a 3-car garage, but the one stall garage, it's all attached, 3 stalls. The one stall has a separate entrance, and that entrance goes to the basement. So it looks like a standard 1-level like home, but it's actually a home with a separate ADU built inside of the basement. Very interesting concept. So the caveat would be that is not a separate PID. It's all one parcel. And in this particular case, the city we were working in said it had to be relative. It couldn't be, couldn't rent it to a non-household member. It had to be someone of your immediate family. But it's a pretty interesting concept how this architect drew the plan so that the ADU is actually built in that particular unit to really, have that family member in the house. That was a pretty neat, creative way of bringing the ADU into a villa type concept.
Yeah, that is interesting. One more question: to what extent over the last decades, not over the last year, do you think lowering interest rates or falling interest rates have impacted the ability of people to buy up and thus increasing home prices? And will we reach a point of equilibrium? Or it doesn't say, but I mean, I imagine if you get to 0% like in some European countries, that might be equilibrium. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. There's no question that the lower the interest rate, that's going to continue to drive home sales and home pricing. I mean, we're sitting at about 2.75%, give or take, today in a 30-year fix, which is unbelievably low rates. Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that these artificially low rates have driven up the real estate market. I mean, the question is, it's going to take a long time to raise rates now because people are so accustomed to these low rates that it's going to take many, 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 many years for the Federal Reserve to really start bring them up, because people are going to balk, I think, when rates start to increase again. So I think it's an interesting market. In the short term, 2021 or even 2022, I think we're probably looking at pretty low interest rates. But yeah, I agree 100% that there's no question that these low interest rates have, inflated the market, so to speak. That has, allowed people to maybe extend their price range or live outside of their means, which historically they may not have been able to do because of, even a 4% rate or whatnot. So, I mean, there's always a give and take there. Whenever, rates go up, you might see some pullback in pricing and vice versa. That's pretty typical in the the mortgage market and the for sale market. So, but I think in the short term, they're probably here to stay for at least a little while.
Great, thanks. Blake, apologies if I missed any questions. I think I basically made it through all the themes and all the individual questions here. And I know Matt and Mary, you have to hop off soon. Do either of you want to kind of share anything that you think maybe you wanted to drive home with the folks who are left on the call? Things that you thought were interesting specifically in this study, maybe compared to other work that you've done?
I think I just want to make one general comment, and I've been talking about this a lot with some other people in the industry, is that, we do have these kind of traditional and historic programs that we've used to try and develop affordable housing. And it is true that I think we haven't delved enough into a lot of other areas, either product types or financial tools, or requirements or restrictions in terms of land and zoning, etc. So I think in terms of looking at developing affordable housing, it really is, it's going to be incumbent, I think, on all of us in the industry to start looking at how can we make an impact or a difference in each of these segments, with product, with financial assistance, with land use laws. I mean, so it's not just one thing. And if we continue to look and see, if we continue to just kind of go down this same road that we have in the past, we're not going to solve our affordable housing issues. So I think it really, and just making a difference in one of those areas is not going to, it needs to be a multi-pronged approach. Because I will just say, I don't think the low-income housing tax credit model is doing enough. It's not doing enough to solve our affordable housing issues. So.
Thanks, Mary. If there's time, one other question for both of you. Could you discuss how Maxfield establishes market demand, kind of generally speaking, just kind of broadly?
Sure. Yeah. I guess it all starts with big picture. What is our household growth? Projected numbers, whatever that would be. Then you apply home ownership rates or rental rates, 10-year rates we call it, and apply those to whether home ownership or renter. But a lot of it's driven by we call household income qualified. It's how many people can afford to purchase or rent at a given rent. So if the average one room hypothetically is $800 per month, that person needs to make $40,000 a year to be able to afford it. So those are kind of some of the big picture metrics we use. But and the reality is, like, the market rate rentals that we're seeing today, this rental boom that's been going robust, and really it's a $50,000 income at a minimum to be able to afford, say, a studio apartment or a one bedroom at, say, $1,000 a month. So it's really almost $50K plus to be able to afford a lot of the market rate, the new market rate product type that we're seeing today. But yeah, I mean, to boil it down, it really comes down to income and those household breaks and where we apply those particular product types to the income. So it's all derived out of household incomes, which as you see, are rather high as a county.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. All right. Well, I know you have places to go, and you've spent the hour and 25 minutes with us, and I think we all appreciate that greatly. If anyone on the call has not received a copy of the report, just chat me in the chat box, and I'll make sure you get that. I know I sent that to most of the stakeholders, but if for some reason you didn't, just let me know. All right. Well, Matt, Mary.
Yeah, Chairman, I'll get you a PDF of that on the PowerPoint today too, so you have a copy. I'll distribute that.
Fantastic. Yep, we will. Great, thank you. Oh, looks like apology.
One quick last thing. So much of your analysis is based on household income, which has kind of an implication of it being two adults. And as you've just said, with COVID and stuff, we're seeing, you know, at least one adult having to stay home. And so doesn't the new normal kind of defeat using contemporary household income? Shouldn't it possibly be based on an individual's income?
So you're talking about per capita income. So typically, we always, you know, housing analysis and whatnot is based on household income, and it's hard to know. I mean, household income would still apply. Say if one person lost a job or left the workforce, and there were four-person household income, you know, we'd still capture their income. It may be lower if that person left the workforce. So that income would still be captured. But I guess the question is right now, there's so many unknowns, right? I mean, with how long this pandemic's going to last, when the vaccine comes, when they get back to normal employment rates, you know, is it 2021, 2022? But there's no question about it. The labor force participation rate is at a, you know, all-time low right now. People have left the workforce. I just don't think we quite know yet how it's going to shake out and how we're going to, you know, how these household incomes are going to play out, you know, long-term or short-term. It's just too early to tell right now how that's going to affect the marketplace. I think a year from now, we'll be able to certainly look back and provide some insight into that question. But as of today, I think it's a real tough question to answer, given all the unknowns in the world today.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thanks, Paul. Matt and Mary, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And thanks for all of you who joined as well. Everybody have a...
No problem. Thanks so much. We appreciate the opportunity. The rest of your day here.
Bye.
Take care.